even though I didn't know the trauma that I was going through because of the life I was living, right? Because no one really said, hey, sorry you went through this.
Yeah, right.
Right? I wasn't getting the apologies that I needed. That I didn't know as a child I needed.
Right.
I know that now. But, and that's when God said to me, you need to forgive for you, not for them, not for anyone else, so that you can live the life that I wanted you to live.
Right.
So once I got a good grasp on that, and once I truly left it to God, I saw God just take justice into his hand. And it was something beautiful, because I feel like that's when I was really able to just kind of let go of that bondage, because it is bondage.
Yes.
It is something that just doesn't let you carry on. Maybe you're not there physically going through it anymore, but they do have a hold on your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now, at 35 years young, I can say that I'm living a life free of that abuse.
That's amazing.
So that is my story.
It's so powerful and so important, because it is hard to share. It's like you said something before about, being prepubescent and stuff. And I'm thinking, so is it someone's fault that it's almost like saying it's your fault for being a woman. Like it's because you just are.
And because you're pretty.
And because you're pretty, it's your fault. And we really have to work so much more harder within our, like even just putting church to the side, just within our culture, we have to do better about how we address our young women, and don't get me wrong, I know there are some girls out there, I get it, but what happened?
Exactly.
What happened to her that she's like that? Find out the story. What happened to that young woman that maybe she is a bit more, more, as they would say, promiscuous, but ultimately, we have to stop making our young women feel like it's always their fault. If he hits you, it's your fault. If he yells at you, it's your fault. If he abused you, it's your fault. If he cheated on you, it's your fault. That's not the case. 99% of the time, And I just feel as though we need to do better, us that either have or haven't gone through it, to have more grace, not keep these stories to ourselves. And I get it, it's hard. I'm not saying that you have to do it at this level.
Right.
What we are saying is you have to find someone to speak to about it, someone that you can trust. And then for those of us who are on the listening end, to have grace and compassion and not condemnation, and be like, so what were you doing in the room though? Because I've heard people say this.
That's true.
And or just that it's so secretive that when people do things, you don't want to say anything. And I get it, like when it's between, because you hear it between small kids, something happened to one kid and now they're harming the other. You want to protect those kids. That's not what I'm talking about. And you deal with that internally. When you're talking about an adult with a child, that's something that has to be exposed, because there's danger that comes down the line from that. I'm not excusing any of it. I'm just saying one child doing something to another child, one of them got hurt somehow. Right. They saw it was done to them, and they're just expressing. Exactly. They don't, the child doesn't just come out knowing those things. But when you're talking about an adult taking advantage, and then again, the whole purpose of us having this conversation is that we need to have the conversation. We need to stop hiding it within our culture, because we want to protect the husband,
protect the family name.
Protect the family name. And I'm not, it's not something that anybody's going to be proud of, but ultimately how much more abuse can happen if you don't have these discussions. Where, we don't want to talk, and I'll say this, we don't want to talk about it in church. We're not talking to our young women about hygiene and what happens to them. We're letting the schools do it, where we can bring a more biblical standpoint that will just show the purity and love about sex. Sex is not evil.
But our culture promotes sex.
Exactly.
Everywhere. TVs,
right.
Social media.
So why can't we have a good conversation with our young women, a real conversation that says, this is what happens. But it's so, like, eso no se habla en la iglesia, eso no se dice en la iglesia.
Yeah.
You can't talk about that from the pulpit. There's a whole book dedicated to sex in the Bible.
Read the Bible.
Like if you read the Bible, there's a whole song about it. So the fact that we make it so difficult and we put so much shame and we outcast our girls, it's just wrong. And so I don't know, Yury, how much you want to share. I know.
Well, you know, just to touch as well, like the importance of sharing it.
Yeah.
Because it brings so much freedom to yourself.
Yes.
When you get to share it and not hold it in. And this is one of the things that I always like would think about. I was like, man, why? I wish I would have known this or gotten help sooner, because maybe I would have saved myself from so much pain growing up.
Yes.
And you know, like when I was 5, I don't know what happened, but I just know what, you know, like the actions. You know, my uncle, which at the time was not even old, he was maybe 17 or 18 at the time. I'm all like, but he lured me and called me into the room, and he's like showing me his pants, and then he's like showing me my pants. I have no idea what happened.
How old were you?
I was 5.
Okay.
I was like, I have no idea what happened. I was like, but all I remember, and I thank God that I don't remember what happened. I was like, but I was like, I just remember coming out of the room, tripping over my pants and picking up my underwear and picking up my pants, and then going to the kitchen where my mom, my tia, and my grandma were, and they're just doing, you know, I'm talking or whatever, and I'm going in there, and for one, you don't interrupt the
adults,
adults talking
in the kitchen.
You know, but no, I went in there and I expressed it the only way I knew how, and I said, I was like, hey, you know, so and so trató de poner su cola en mi cola. You know,
that was the best way.
Like that's 5.
And
I was like, he tried to put his butt in my butt. Like, you know, that's all I knew how to express. And my mom looked at me like, quítate, vete de aquí. What are you talking about? And that was the end of it. And I just stood there like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's okay. You know, it's normal. I'm all like, whatever, it's not a big deal. And that's all I ever remember. And I went on living life. But something like that, you know, it's a violation of your innocence.
Yes.
You know, that's such a violation of an innocence on a little girl or little boy. That's something that should not happen. That stuff should never happen. And so right there, I believe that, you know, it just opened the door for more violations to occur to me. So even growing up, like, I live a very promiscuous life. So yeah, like even growing up, it caused me into promiscuity. Like it just opened that door. Like purity, innocence, I didn't have that because it was taken away from me at such a young age, you know. And we don't realize that, like when some type of abuse happens to us at a young age, something gets stolen from us, and it just opens that door for more. It's like a cycle that happens, and that cycle never breaks. Whether you were the abusive, like you've been abused, and you either become the abuser or you continue to allow abuse, like abuse to happen into your life. And growing up, that's how I was. Like sex was nothing. I was very promiscuous. I was like, okay, whatever, living my best life. You know, I was like, and even like getting into relationships, I couldn't really be I never had been in a healthy relationship. Why? Because like, one, I didn't have a father in my life, and then the men that were in the life abused me, you know, and so then it's just something that I never really had. So in my relationships, I allowed just the wrong things to happen, like, you know, where I got involved in a very abusive relationship, and I allowed it because I deserved it, you know, because I talked back, you know, or whatever. And when I learned that, hey, like, you know, once I started, like, when I got saved and everything, I started like paying attention or like figuring out like, hey, you know what? I was like, none of that was okay. And the root of it was because of what happened many years ago when I was a child. You know, and we don't realize that how much freedom women can have if we talk about it, if we're open with it. And then even just that, like me learning that, hey, I am worthy, I'm worth it, I'm not dirty, you know, because that was one of the feelings I had over myself, that I always felt dirty. You know, like you feel dirty, and why? You know, like and it's something I felt as a little kid, even as like elementary, middle school, I felt dirty, you know, and I was like, you're a child, you're not. Kids are innocent, and just imagine how many kids out there are having that feeling, you know, and they carry it with them growing up, you know, because something like whatever we do, we just get involved in our own lives. We don't ask our kids, hey, what's going on?
Exactly.
You know, or even when they do speak up, like we said, we hide it under the rug, and it's sad, but like, you know, young girls like, hey, speak up about it, because I think about it now and I'm like, man, if I would have gotten help, or I would have talked to someone, I was like, because I felt the shame, guilt, all of that, but now I'm able to talk about it no problem, because hey, that's my past. I was like, that's what I talked about. I was like, hey, I was a little hoe. Yes, I was. I was like, but it's okay. I was like, that's my past. You know, that's not who I am now. I'm like, I've been redeemed through all that, and just something interesting that happened. A few, like I shared with you a few weeks ago actually, because one of the issues that I always had was learning I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to talk. I would always keep quiet. Growing up, I'll try to say something or speak up, but I wouldn't say it because I'm like, oh, I don't have the right words. They're not going to understand me. Or if I do say something, I'm misunderstood. And I'm like, that's not what I meant, you know? And that was a cause of a lot of problems in my relationships, because I would say something and they would take it the wrong way. And I'm like, oh, you know? And so I would stay quiet and not say, I wouldn't speak up. And so I started thinking, I was like, man, why am I like that? Like, why am I like that? And I started going back to thinking when I was 5 years old. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I went and told my mom and my tias what happened. And they just went, quítate. No, ¿de qué estás hablando? Like, what are you talking about? You know, get out of here. They didn't understand what I was saying. So I was misunderstood. And because I didn't know how to express myself. So growing up, I had that on me as well, where I felt like I could never express myself, you know, and it wasn't until I pinpointed that, until, you know, that exposure, that I was able to talk about it. I talked about it with you, Selina. I even talked over with a couple friends, where I was like, even just exposing, I was like, yeah, you know what? I was like, the root of why I can't express myself was because of what happened. I was like, that thing, you know, it was something that was put on me, and I felt like I couldn't express myself. I was like, no, you know what? That's not true. And then just pretty much like reaffirming the truth. It was like, I am a good communicator. I do talk, I speak well. I can express myself well, you know? And that's always something I struggle with, was communicating and speaking up. And you know, I think I even shared it in the other videos where I'm like, oh, I sound ghetto. I sound too ghetto. I can't talk. You know, because I don't sound articulated. But yesterday I had an interview, and the lady like who interviewed me described me, you're very well articulated. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, I've never been described that way. I was like, and I'm like, and it made me feel so good, because that was, because it's a struggle that I struggle with, and I'm like, I am not well articulated. I was like, but I guess I sounded very well articulated in my interview. But you know, but that's just the growth and the process of figuring it out, because I always struggle in my speech or my talking or whatever, but I've been described as well articulated. So now I'm like, oh, okay.
I have to laugh at you saying that, only because I will never forget first year when we graduated School of Ministry, and she had to speak. She had to do, like, she was kind of like the valedictorian for the graduation, and it was such a powerful message. So I laugh. I'm looking at her like, what the hell are you talking about?
No, but that's exactly it. Because
it was so good.
No, but it's that thing you carry that I believe. It was the lie that I believed that.
Exactly.
And the root of it was when I was like, I can never express myself because my mom and my tia, they didn't believe me. They didn't know what I was talking about. I was like, I said something that sounded like nonsense to them.
Right.
You know, I was like, and so since then I carried that. I was like, and it was a lie that I believe that I'm not well spoken. I can never express myself. I'm always misunderstood. So it held me back. It held me many opportunities where I wanted to speak my mind or speak my, say my opinion, but then I'll be like, no, it's gonna be misunderstood. They're not gonna understand me. No, and I was like, the moment passed. I'm trying to gather my thoughts or trying to gather my words, and
they didn't call me. Good thing they didn't call me.
Yeah, so then I was like, oh, okay, no, never mind. And then they're like, oh, when something is or a big issue is bothering me, like, no, I'm okay. And I'm like, I'm okay. And it's just stuff that, something that happened.
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, and it's crazy how I don't know, it's just crazy how these little things, these little roots can be from a trauma, from an abuse, and we don't realize the freedom we can have when we talk about it.
Exactly.
And we need to talk about it.
Yes.
We need to be okay with it and not have the shame and the guilt that comes with it, because it's not something that we wanted. We didn't invite it. I was like, no, it was something that happened to us, but the freedom that would happen when we actually say it.
You said little roots, but I just wanted to emphasize on the different types of abuses that there are, right? Because we said little boys, little girls. There's even abuse for our elderly.
Right. Yeah.
Or for those who are mute.
Right.
They can't speak. How are they going to cry out for help?
Right.
So I just, I want you to know that abuse can come in different forms, and it's anything that makes you feel like, hey, this is not right. You're violating my space, my mind, my way of thinking, my just anything that this is not of God. So just put a stop to that, set boundaries. And that's big, because again, with our society and just the day and age that we live in, there's no respect for boundaries. So we just think that we just gotta take it all.
Right.
And so
entitled.
Everybody's just calling shots left and right. Well, you call your own shots and just speak out on that, because you're not gonna realize, just because it's not as gory or as maybe as I'm sorry, I don't have the word, but maybe it's not as it wasn't as aggressive as someone else's experience.
Correct.
It still brought maybe the same, if not worse, issues down the road mentally. Just so many sicknesses that come from that, and that has been my biggest thank you to the Lord, to say, I could have turned out so much worse.
Right.
I went through my crazy phase, all that, yes.
Right.
But even then, the God's hand was still with me all the way, and I, was able to just say, okay, I'm done with that, and God, thank you. You really delivered me from that. So, and I just say to those listening, like, speak to that root and cut it.
Yes.
Just be free from it, because God wants that from you today.
Absolutely.
And so, that's one thing that I wanted to just focus on, because I feel like everybody just kind of downplays things like, well, I went through worse things than you did.
And that's the excuse. That's the danger with the excuse. I am not what happened to me.
Right.
I am not the trauma that I have. Now, you become the trauma that you went through when you don't talk about it.
That's right.
Because your silence empowers the oppressor.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, you accept it.
Exactly. You've accepted this, and now you're living it.
Right.
I could have, I didn't experience abuse the way you ladies have. I had different types of traumas. And so there had to be a point in my life where I had to forgive, people that I love, like, my mother, rejection. And at that point, that's where I had my freedom. And so why? Because I had to verbally accept the fact that this really happened. This is what this feels like. It sucks. But it didn't define the person that I was.
That's right.
If anything, I was like, I am not going to live that life. This is the life that I'm going to choose to live. I do not want to do that. And to the point where a lot of people thought I was conceited. So, because I thought very highly of myself, maybe a little bit too much. I'm just being honest. Like, you know, the grace of truth. If my husband was here, he'd be like, she thought a little bit too much about herself. A lot. But I think that because I experienced so much rejection, again, this is where you can empower your trauma to be something positive. And I know that sounds awful, right? Because no one should have to go through any trauma. Please understand, I'm not saying go through hell to be a better person. What I'm saying is that you have the ability to shift that trauma to become a better person. Because people stay stuck in there, and I hear the stories all the time. You see how you're sharing right now, there's a solution and a resolution. Doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. You're still learning. I mean, you're both in your 30s. You're still learning to grow from this really, you know, awful place that you guys dealt with as a kid. But you're shifting it for something better. And the more you talk about it, the more freedom you experience. I get very annoyed with women who are like, why is she telling all her business? Why are you saying everything? People are gonna talk, they're gonna talk about you anyway.
Another one? Or something
like, yeah, you know, like, people are gonna talk about you anyway.
Sure.
Because if they don't know about your bad business, what are they gonna say? She thinks she's too good. Oh, look at her. She's so perfect. She has a perfect life. Oh, so I can't tell you about my trauma, but also, when I don't, now I think I'm too good. So these are the things that we do to one another. But it's important to shift that. And so what did I decide? That's not the life I want for me. This is the life that I want. I don't want that. And it's not that I thought better, that I was better than anyone else. I just chose to walk in confidence.